Good.
Hello.
Good. Good evening, everybody. How is everybody tonight?
Hey.
Look at those boots.
How many of you picked up trash today?
They're my
All
snazzy.
right. How many are going to pick up trash tomorrow? Even if you have a hangover? Let's hope. Anyway, I want to welcome everybody. This is our 16th annual. We got great programs every night. Hopefully you can see all of them. I'm looking for my notes. I may have set them down back there. But we got about 1,400 pounds today of small trash. And we had approximately 630 people that signed up and picked up trash today. And that doesn't include some of the kids groups. So I would probably say around 750, which is probably more than we've ever had show up on a Wednesday. So it's going to be a big one, folks. Yeah, there's the notes. We'll see how close I was. 1,435 pounds plus 190 pounds of heavier special project trash. 632 signed up volunteers, not including the kids. So pretty awesome. Almost 3,000 hours donated today. It's actually probably a lot more. Give yourselves a big hand. So new this year, we are live streaming all the evening events. If you have friends that want to watch this, or you have friends that participate in other facelifts and they're not here this time and they want to watch what's going on, they can go to YouTube, and we have a Yosemite Facelift live feed channel. You can see the shows later as well. They record them. And you can find that link by going to our Instagram page, Yosemite Facelift Instagram page, and you'll find that link. And one other announcement. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the bar staff. Yeah. Without them, you wouldn't be drinking any beer. Also, without Tioga Sequoia, we wouldn't have any beer either. I'd like to thank them. How many of you saw the Yosemite Facelift can or label that we have? That's new this year. It's pretty cool. I'd also like to thank Ed and Shannon and Jim back there who are doing our AV and the live feed. It's a lot of work, so give them a big hand, please. And I'm going to pass over the mic to Allison Gonzalez. Allison works just as hard as I do all year long, and that's why this event keeps getting better and better every year, because I put more work on her, so poor thing. But anyway, she's got a few words to say, and we'll see you out there tomorrow, and have a good night tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. So I've got my 3 announcements I need to make. First day of volunteering. Yes, I'm so excited to see you guys. First thing is, tomorrow we have a stewardship panel, 2:30, over at the registration. Tommy Caldwell, Eric Raymond from the North Face, Brendan McManus from Patagonia Wornwear. We're going to be having a conversation about responsible consumerism and making good choices with our dollars, especially in the outdoor industry, and how the outdoor industry could be a model for other industries, with an eye toward environmentalism. Second announcement, silent auction. Go check out our silent auction. I heard a lot last year that no one even knew we had a silent auction. We have a silent auction out on the mall. Some awesome things there. Big print from Jimmy Chin. It's worth it just to go see that. Wasn't up this morning, but it was up this afternoon, and it will be up for the rest of the week. So come by, check that out, and bid generously. All of the dollars will go to the Yosemite Climbing Association. And finally, our sponsors. We've got some cool new collaborations with our sponsors this year. The North Face is a co-presenting sponsor. They're going to be doing a technical cleanup on Mount Watkins with the Climber Stewards and the climbing management team. So that partnership's been developed, and we're really excited about having that collaboration with them. Black Diamond will be doing the same on Half Dome. So sponsors of the day, the North Face on Saturday, Black Diamond on Friday. And our other top financial sponsors, Subaru, official vehicle of Facelift. Who has a Subaru? Yeah, very popular vehicle. Wonderful. Yeah, good point. Where's Abana? Did Abana hear that? They don't make a van. All right. Also, Patagonia is actually our longest running financial sponsor, so thank you, Patagonia.
Yeah.
And Cliff. This year, Cliff is actually hosting their athlete summit here during Facelift, so we're really happy to have them. Thank you, guys. Enjoy this evening.
Okay, give it up for Allison Gonzalez. Allison Gonzalez, keep it going. Come on. Are you guys here? All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Timmy O'Neill, and on the count of three, if you could tell me your first name. 1, 2, 3. Okay, please, people, stand up. Take your feet right now. Okay, take your feet. That means stand up. Quickly, take your feet. You can hold your beer. You're going to be climbing now. We're going to go for a climb right now. We're going to get psyched. Hold your beer in one hand so you can climb with one hand like Aaron Ralston. Okay, now go with me. So start crack climbing. Right now, we're crack climbing. Okay, now look at your feet. Look at your feet now. Bring your feet up. Okay, take that number one off your harness. Plug it in. Bring the rope up. Clip it in. Now take a whipper. Ah! Now sit back down. Okay, good. So it was great climbing with everybody. I've never climbed with 350 people at the same time, and that was amazing. I'd like to make a special mention right now to my dear friend Leo Burke. I love you, Leo Burke, 83, volunteering every year. He's the best dancer on the planet. Make some noise for Leo Burke right now. Yes, Leo Burke. Ooh, 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 ooh. Monkey call. Ooh, ooh. Every night, tirelessly cleaning, mopping, sweeping this venue from your dirty-ass climbers' feet. Thank you, Leo Burke. We love you. Okay, so Ken Yeager, Allison Gonzalez, not single-handedly, many volunteers, people coming many years in a row. In fact, you guys are volunteers. Who here has been all 16 years? Anybody 16 years? All 16? Just like one person, and they just died. So now we only have 15 years. That was dark, but let's get light again. Okay, so it is a joy to be here. I love this national park. I worked here as an employee when I was 20 years old, so many years ago. And I've come back every year to climb. And everybody that comes here once is like, I must return to this place every year. We return to our sacred places, and we need to clean and care for our sacred places. So thank you for doing that, and thank you to Ken, Allison, all our volunteers for putting the Facelift together. So let's get on with our shows. We had shows last night. We have shows tonight. We have them tomorrow night. We have 15 speakers over the course of 5 days. Amazing. The best party for the best reason on the planet. Anybody here been to Boulder, Colorado? Boulder, Colorado. I lived in Colorado for 20 years before moving out to the Bay recently, and it is an epicenter, absolutely a zone for climbing, not only in the United States, but globally. They have many great climbing areas there and many great climbers, but all types of climbers. Our next presenter hails out of Boulder, Colorado. She got her first experience climbing right here as a 12-year-old through the Yosemite climbing, the mountaineering school. Anybody here work for the mountaineering school in the audience tonight? Mountaineering school, there it is. Thank you, guide. You could have hooked up somebody like Molly Mitchell in the future and be setting up somebody to achieve epic, almost amazing, in fact, even better than outrageous, crazy. So thank you, guide. Yeah, thank you, guide. And to all you pirate guides and friend guides out there as well, thank you for turning people on to climbing, because it brings great things to life, as a matter of fact. So, without further ado, please, a warm Facelift round of applause for Molly Mitchell. Yeah.
Hey everyone, it's so good to see you guys. I'm so honored to speak. I haven't done actually much climbing in Yosemite, but I did started here, as Timmy just mentioned, and so it's an honor to be back. So tonight is actually a very vulnerable speech for me. I'm going to talk about some personal growth that I feel I've achieved over the process of working on my latest achievement, which is this route called China Doll in Boulder Canyon. And it was my first 514 trad route. And that has always been a dream of mine. And so it was a dream come true. But I honestly feel like the steps that I've made as a person, mentally, have actually been more important over the process. So I'm going to start with a little background information about me, and then I'll talk about the climb. So I started in Yosemite, actually. When I was 12 years old, my dad took me on a trip to Yosemite. We were like hiking and biking and exploring the park, and I got to top rope, and it was that swan slab, which you can see right here. And I fell in love with the idea of climbing. But where I lived in Fort Worth, Texas at the time, we didn't have a climbing gym near our house. And we actually moved to Atlanta shortly after. And we didn't really have a climbing gym near our house there either. And honestly, I feel like only in the last 5 years, climbing has become more of a well-known sport. So my parents were like, well, we're not going to drive you an hour after school to a climbing gym and drop you off. So it was a far-fetched dream for me as a kid. But then when I was 16 years old, I was running track at the time, and I got my driver's license and found a climbing gym that was an hour away because I was really sick of track. And I joined the gym and convinced my parents to let me go on the weekends. And then that became me going basically every day throughout the week, and then going outside on the weekends. This is a bouldering area in Alabama. In the right photo. Woo! Yeah, Alabamians. So I moved to Colorado when I was 18 years old to go to school at CU Boulder. And I started training at Team ABC with Robin Rabitou, and she kind of became this second mom for me. And we traveled a bunch together and climbed a bunch. And I also became really good friends with Heather Widener, who's also pictured in this photo on the right. Let's see if I can get the laser. Oh, no. All right, well, she's on the right over here. And I started training a bunch, and then a couple years after I moved to Colorado, I actually developed this viral thyroid disease, which kind of just left me feeling really awful all the time. And something that developed from that is I started really overanalyzing how I felt all the time, even when it got better. It lasted about a year in total, but then as I was getting better, I still was having these thoughts of if I didn't feel well and I went to the gym, I'd really judge how I did, and I'd compare myself to other people, and I was really in my head. And I kept going to the doctor, and eventually she was like, I feel like there might be something else going on. I think you might have some anxiety. And so I went to see a psychiatrist in Boulder, and he actually diagnosed me with an anxiety disorder. And I started to see him and learn something called acceptance and commitment therapy, which is basically learning how to defuse from thoughts and try to accept feelings and let them exist without judging them, and basically learn that the only thing you can directly control is your behavior. And right around this time, I got the opportunity from some of the guides at ABC to go out and learn how to trad climb. And I noticed this parallel between what I was learning with the therapy and what trad climbing really involved, which is so mental. And it was a lot of, you have to place a piece, you have to trust yourself, you're having thoughts of fear, you're feeling really scared, and everything, your mind is racing, but you have to place a piece and move on and trust it. And I really liked that aspect of trad climbing. And so this route, center route on the left, was actually my first trad lead. And I didn't know at the time that 5'11" is not your first normal trad lead. I think that they had more confidence in me than and I was very naive. So it worked, though. I did the route. So my second trad lead was actually the Evictor. And I did fall on that, and that was my first time falling on gear. So that was really exciting. It was really scary. But I actually went out and did that route the next day with one of the guides named Ryan Arment. And I have a funny story about this route that involves Alex Honnold. So, it's going to be a good one. I was so excited when I did this route that I posted on Facebook that I did it, as we all like to spray on social media. And he actually commented on it, and he was like, wow, you did the Evictor? That's so cool. That thing is so hard. And me at 22 years old, I'm like, oh my God, Alex Honnold just commented on my photo. I am so cool. And I was feeling all high and mighty. And then about a week later, he sends me a text, and he's like, oh, you did the Evictor? I thought you did this other route called Beethoven's Fifth, which is way harder. So I got uncongratulated by Alex Honnold. Yeah. So I thought about that and looked into it, and I went out and actually did Beethoven's Fifth. And I did tag him in the post and said, thank you for the recommendation, Alex Honnold. Yeah. So I had a little bit of early success with trad. something clicked, and I did another route, which is pictured here, called Freeline, which is at the same crag that I started at, Rincon Wall in El Dorado Canyon. And I feel like sometimes when you have early success with something, you get a bit of an ego. And I definitely felt that I had an ego. And it took me like moving to Vegas actually, and learning that like I'm not really that awesome, and there are a lot of other hard climbs out there that I can't do, to learn that. And I still feel kind of guilty about having an ego. But I think when you're like pursuing something like climbing or just any sport in general, I think it's natural to have that, and I'm really glad that I don't anymore. But anyway, so I moved to Vegas actually in 2016, and I decided that I really wanted to focus on getting physically stronger, because I felt like I wasn't really up to par with where I felt like I needed to be. And I was coaching a bunch of kids at the time, and they really inspired me to train harder. And I started sport climbing more because I felt like I needed to up my sport grade. And these are some of the kids that I coached. They're really adorable. This girl in the corner is so awesome. Her name's Bree. And this was actually, we did this photo shoot for like Las Vegas Weekly, and they're like, act serious. And we're like, yikes, okay. So yeah. But so I worked out really hard at sport climbing, and I did my first 14A back in 2017 at Mount Charleston in Nevada. And it was this big breakthrough, like physically, like I really never thought that I would be able to climb 14A. So it gave me a lot of confidence. And I did another one at the same crag called Gild the Lily. Yeah. And actually back in September of 2018, I decided that I wanted to move back to Boulder. I missed the Boulder bubble, and I missed like the climbing community there. And I decided to return to Team ABC and coach there, which I currently coach there. And I was a little bit like confused as to what my next step was. I just didn't really know like what I wanted to focus on. I was kind of like, maybe I should get back into trad now that I've like worked on my sport climbing for a bit. And so I went to Rincon Wall, again, like the same wall that I started at, and checked out this route called Frayed Line, which I hadn't done, and top roped it for a day or two, and then went back and led it. And it was kind of cool because I haven't had an experience like that in a while, where you're a little bit run out on gear, and it got me really excited about trad again. So I, shortly after that, went and gave this speech at the Mountaineers, which was probably like the first really vulnerable speech I gave. I talked a lot about my anxiety, and it was really received very well, and I ended up writing this article about climbing through an anxiety disorder for them. And I actually, in that speech, mentioned that I wanted to climb 514 trad as my next goal, which was like this huge thing for me because I'm not normally very vocal about what my goals are, because I have this like insecurity that like if I don't do it, then I'm not good enough, and I'm not like living up to something, that an expectation that I set for myself. So that was just like kind of a big breakthrough for me speaking, because I was able to like trust myself that that was like what I really wanted to put time into. So, yeah. Thanks. Thank you. So I actually, I don't know if you guys know, you probably do. Heather Widener sent this route China Doll back in 2016, and I actually belayed her when she sent, which was super inspiring. And it's kind of like this full circle story now, and she was really supportive when I was working on it. But when she sent this route, I was like in such awe and so inspired, but I also never thought that I would be at that level working on something like that. So it's kind of like just this really crazy thing that I actually went back and started working on it. But like I said, I was like, well, maybe like I can go and try this one because it's convenient, it's in Boulder, and there also are like steps to it. The route actually has 2 pitches, and the first pitch is bolted actually. So you can climb it on sport, it's a 13C, and then you can also climb it on gear. And then if you climb that pitch with the pitch above it, which is like 13CD, I think, then it's 14A. And the second pitch is only on gear. You can't clip any bolts, there are no bolts to clip. But so I was like, well, maybe I can just try the 13C sport and see how it feels, and then there's no pressure, because then I'll like at least have done something. And so my friend Sasha DeJulian and I decided to go out and try it, and we both were like so dumbfounded at first. We were like, I do not understand this granite weirdness. It's super technical and just something that I'm not used to. I'm really more of a, I like crimps, slightly overhanging. And this was definitely the opposite of that. So it was definitely a challenge for us. And I also started training again. I contacted my friend Tim Rose, who I'd coached with in Vegas, and he put together this training plan for me based on my goal of climbing China Doll. And so I started training really hard, and I was working a lot, coaching, and I was trying to get out and climb China Doll as much as possible too. And it was just really like this really hard thing to figure out, and I ended up getting really stressed out a lot of the time, and I was really tired all the time. And when I'm really tired and stressed, my anxiety really peaks. So I ended up searching for a new psychologist in Boulder to see if I could go talk to someone and see how I felt after a few sessions. And I really like this quote because I just feel like it's like I could have gone on with what I was dealing with and like maybe succeeded, but I'm so glad that I chose to go see someone because all of the things that I learned while I was seeing this woman really helped me with the climb itself, with the process. So, yeah, this is me taking a selfie training, taking a little break. Yeah. So these are 3 statements that I have always had trouble with. I want to see a show of hands of anyone who's ever had a feeling or a thought like one of these statements. Yeah. I definitely, when my anxiety's peaking, I think these a lot. And it really doesn't help with your climbing, and it doesn't help with any other aspect of your life. So I was really determined to figure out a way to deal with this and to figure out a way to change these thoughts that I was having. And so something that my psychologist told me is that sometimes you have to say the things like, I am good enough, my value is determined by me, I'm worthy. And you have to say it a lot before you actually believe it. And I think that that's really true in climbing too, because I was working on this really horrendous climb for me, and it felt impossible at first. And you kind of just have to throw yourself at it over and over again and hope that you'll just make progress. So I actually did that, and I ended up sending the sport version of the 13C. Sasha also sent as well, which was super cool. I think I sent it like a week after her. But I felt like I wasn't completely satisfied with just sending the sport version, and I was really interested in figuring out the gear for the trad version. So something that I've always struggled with too is that I don't really know exactly what I value. And my psychologist gave me this sheet like a few months ago that was like, rank your values. And it was like the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my entire life, like ranking values 1 to 10. And like she also gave me this other sheet that was like a 1 to 5 scale, and it would be like relationships, and then it would be like work and like success, and every one of them I was like 5 out of 5, 5 out of 5. Like I care about them so much. And she was like, it's impossible to care about all of these things this much. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So so something that a couple of these that I really realized during this process that I care about is authenticity. And to me, authenticity means just being super real, super raw, honest, and forthcoming with like what you want and what you desire. And I think that working on the trad version of this was a really neat experience for being authentic to myself, because it was really scary. The 13C pitch is super scary. And it was just this like, I was constantly checking in with myself with where I was at and how I was feeling about it. And it was really my own doing of like what I wanted, of what my goal was with this climb. So that was really a unique thing to realize about myself, is that I want to be real with people, and I want to share my experiences with people, with everyone right here, being vulnerable and talking about things that aren't always easy. Yeah. Thanks. Another thing that I want to talk about is like presence. So I feel like it's really important to, yeah, I'll go back. Yeah, I feel like it's really important to find presence for me, especially because I have anxiety. I'm always constantly thinking about stuff. I definitely have to have those moments of presence. And when I'm trad climbing and like trying at my limit, I really do feel that presence. But it's not always easy to find that in my normal life. So that was something that I had to think about as well, that I value that and I need to be able to figure out a way to feel that in my everyday life. Another thing that I value is alone time. I actually I really do value connection with people, but I've been realizing more and more that like the more time I spend alone, the more time and energy I have to dedicate to other people when it really matters. So that was a huge revelation as well. Yeah. All right, so figuring out the gear for the 13C. As you can see, I was super stoked on these awesome pieces. They're really trustworthy. Yeah, so this section actually right here on the right where it's shown was the scariest part of the route, and it was down low, but like you solo this 5/9, or I soloed this 5/9 to get up to the top, or to get to the start of the route, and then you place these pieces, below that where that anchor is that you can see in the photo, I have like 2 cams in this horizontal crack. But there's a massive ledge below that, so I really didn't want these pieces to blow. And it was just this really challenging thing, and it really tested me and what I care about, to try to get over the fear of those ripping. And I did actually fall on the ball nut 2 to 3 times, and and it held. So all good on that front. But it definitely tested what what I care about with the route, because if it's scary, it's hard to justify always doing something if there's consequences. So during the middle of working on figuring out the gear for the 13C, I took this trip to Lander to teach a clinic for the International Climbing Festival. And it went really well. It was actually about dealing with failure on your project, which I do a lot. I fail a lot, so it was great. It was a good thing for me to teach, and a good reminder to try to find those present moments during and enjoy the process of a project that you feel like you're failing at. And so I actually decided after the clinic I saw this 11C that topped out, and I was like, oh, that would be really cool to go back and climb it without clipping anything. So I decided to go back and do that just on a whim, just for fun. And I think that really just was super authentic to what I really love about climbing, and it was just this really fun adventure, and it was this moment of presence, again, like I was talking about, and I felt alone. I was with maybe 1 or 2 friends, and I felt present, and I just was really excited about it, and it was a really good just distraction from projecting and feeling like you have to complete something and always be making progress, and it just, it was therapy for me. So it was a good little distraction in the middle of figuring out gear and dealing with fear. So while I was working on the 13C trad, I started climbing with this guy named Zach, and he's super cool, really nice guy, and he was stoked on climbing the 13C on trad too. But I also just felt, because it was really scary, that it was really hard for me to feel. He was starting to lead it, and I was not really stoked to be leading it all the time, and I just felt this pressure sometimes. Sometimes when you're climbing with another partner, they are so stoked for you and they want you to succeed so bad, and I felt this pressure to be leading it and be doing as well as he was doing. And so I just didn't know what was wrong with me. I felt like a bad person, and I was overcommitting myself to going out climbing all the time, and I just felt all this constant guilt because I wasn't 100% present with him with climbing it. And then I talked to my psychologist about this, and we kind of talked about more aspects in my life, and I feel like for me, I'm very much a people pleaser. Is anyone else here a people pleaser? Yeah. I have trouble saying no to people, and I'm easily peer pressured. And so I love these quotes. I think that it's very much applicable. I definitely needed to learn that putting up boundaries is not always a negative thing. And I feel like in our society, sometimes we do think that boundaries are just this constant no, negative, hard line. And I think it's important to know that you can set boundaries that will actually do something very positive for both parties. So I started climbing a little bit on my own and just going at my own speed, and it actually ended up working really well because I sent the 13C on trad. So And yes, that is me drinking a hard seltzer at 11 a.m. um, and yeah, I think like learning that boundary issue was really good for me, because I think sometimes it's easy to be like, this person is a bad person because they're like trying to like get me to do this, when in fact like it could be that you're being too like overly pleasing of everyone else. And it was just like that was like a huge breakthrough for me. Learning to do things at my own pace, on my own time, on my own schedule, in the way that I feel like I need to for me, especially when it's scary. Like it was really important for me to do that. Yeah, goes along with being authentic too. So I actually, at this point, I was like, I gained some confidence from learning all this stuff, and I was like, okay, like I am gonna go for the 514 trad. And I talked to my trainer Tim, and I had taken a break from training when I was working on the 13C on trad. And he was like, all right, we're going to have you like start training for like a month during August, because I sent the first day of August, the 13C trad. We're going to have you start training while you're working out like top roping the upper section and figuring out moves. And then like come September, it'll be like another rest month. And then you can hopefully just be like giving it red point burns. This is me giving it a very sweaty night session, which happened a lot because summer is not the most ideal time for that climb. And this is me dragging my cousin out to come belay me, because I was just trying to do things on my own, and sometimes it helped to have someone that literally, she knew nothing about climbing. I had her simul wrap in with me, and she had never touched a gree-gree, so it was good, yeah. So safe. Oh yeah, I decided to include this because I thought it was hilarious how many battle wounds I got from this climb. It was really tearing me apart. It was kind of crazy, but I didn't really want to tape the fingers because like whenever I taped the pointer finger, it was too thick for like this finger lock that I had in the upper crux, and I just hated it. So I just kept ripping it open. And it was like kind of hilarious because as you'll see in the photos upcoming, my, this is a blank slide. Yeah. Yeah. Here we go. All right. I had so many wounds going up this, and like everyone was like, "Well, why are you wearing shorts?" And I was like, "Because it's so hot." So it was just like really sweaty in the months that I was working on it. But anyway, so this is me going into the upper crux of China Doll. And as you can see, it's pretty thin up there, which is why I didn't want to tape like my fingers as much. And this is a text from my trainer, Tim. He texted me because I was starting to get really bad red point nerves. Has anyone gotten red point nerves? Anyone? Does anyone know what that means? To get nervous about like sending something. Like you put pressure on yourself? Yeah? Yeah, totally. All right, so I get really bad nerves about being able to complete something because I'm just really hard on myself, kind of like going along with those statements that I say to myself sometimes about not being good enough or not being worthy. And so he texted me this, and I thought it was really applicable to what I was learning too, about that like you can't like control everything in what you're doing, and you can only control what you're doing in the present moment when you're fighting on the route. It doesn't matter like how hot it is, like, if it feels really slick, if there's a lot of people getting on the route, if there's other people at the crag. It was a really nice thing for him to say because I felt like everyone knew that I could do this climb, but I didn't know it. And it was like really hard for me to accept that I could do it. And so I think that learning to be able to trust in myself was really important. And even though everyone was like expecting me, or not expecting, but like everyone knew I could do this climb and they were telling me I was so close. And it was really important for me to just like focus on the moment. So the day after he sent me this text, I sent. So it was really cool. Yeah, I just texted him because he was like one of the first people I wanted to tell because he'd been with me through the entire process. And when I sent, it was just not even good conditions at all. And like the 13C felt so terrible, but I think I just got in this mindset of like, I'm just going to try my best through the upper section and whatever happens, happens. And I think that really ended up working in my favor because I didn't have the pressure. I didn't have the like, oh, I'm not good enough to climb 514 trad, and I just went for it, and I just like gave it my all, and it was a good day. Yeah. So, this is Zach on the left. I don't know whose abs are better. I can't really tell. What do you think? This is my friend Nellie who belayed me in the middle. And like, they were so supportive, and they were just, I remember going through the crux, and they were just screaming at the top of their lungs. And I was screaming at the top of my lungs, but for a very different reason. I felt like you know when you like do something and you just like, I was in disbelief. And I got a little bit of like imposter syndrome after too. I was just like, I couldn't believe that it happened. And I feel like now it's been about 2 weeks since I did it, and it's finally settling in. So this is a really good time to talk about it. Yeah. And yeah, thank you guys for listening to me. Oh yeah.
Yeah, give it up. Give it up for Molly Mitchell. Molly Mitchell, come on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Molly. Okay, so real quick. Yeah, super fan right there, Miles. We love you, Miles Latham. So Molly, real quick on the route. So it was 2 pitches of 513C combined as 1 pitch. What was the eventual pitch? How long is the 14A pitch? As far as meters,
like, I think it's 40 meters.
40 meters. And who was the originator? Was it who
Mike
put up?
Patz.
Mike Patz put up. Did he put up both of them?
He did the link up together.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
here.
Mike Patz, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think he does he's a medical guy, right? Yeah. Regardless, so I just wanted to get the specifics. So it's like the 2 pitches together. But my question is, when people lend you their belief, like people are like, I know you could do it.
Yeah.
And then you're able to use that. Do you find yourself paying that forward? Like as a coach or working with other people
Totally.
and sort of doing that for others?
I do. I think, though, it was interesting in this aspect because I feel like everyone was so supportive and so awesome about, like, basically they knew I could do it before I did. And I think, though, like, because of what I've been learning with my therapy and everything, like, I had to believe it in myself first before I did it. And I think that was, like, a really special thing that it was, like, I did this route, you know? Like, I think it's the first time that I've owned like an accomplishment on my own. And so I think that was really cool. But I do agree that yes, support means so much to me, and I'm so grateful for everyone that throughout the whole process just like lending an ear. And I definitely am always there for my friends. I was there for Heather when she was working on it. And I saw all the ups and downs, and I see with the kids when they go through failure. That's why I taught that clinic on dealing with failure, because it's like it's something that everyone experiences, but everyone experiences in a different way. And I think it's just really important to always be there for the other person.
Exactly, part of that tribal thing. Any
Yeah.
questions for Molly Mitchell out there in the audience? Any questions for Molly? Yeah, Miles, what's your question? Okay, this is interesting. And we're going to get back to that later on that question. But I do have a question for you. And it's kind of the concept around like the work you're doing on yourself, right, as far as psychological work and dealing with anxiety. That requires a regimen, right? And then climbing has that same regimen.
Training regimen. Yeah, it's like mental training.
And how did that work for you? It's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Were like you already into this climbing regimen, understanding that you could apply that same plan and wherewithal and gumption and integrity, and then you applied it to dealing with your anxiety?
I think that's actually a really good question, because I feel like when I started trad climbing, the dealing with my anxiety part helped with that so much. But then when I wasn't really seeing anyone, and then I went to Vegas, started learning how to train. So I was really confident on the training aspect, and especially like I trust my friend Tim so much. And then I just like didn't even realize how much working with a therapist again would help with the mental aspect. And it was just this like cohesive thing that ended up working in my favor. Yeah, I think it like having both at the same time, I haven't ever had that in the past, like thinking about it now. I had like the therapy before when I was really focused on just trad climbing and wasn't as physically strong. And then like I had the training in Vegas with like all of the amazing crushers out there that like just like basically took me under their wing like Bill Ramsey and was like, this is how we're going to train.
We're going to do this. And then it's interesting to think about that concept of bad anxiety and good anxiety, right? Sort of that anxiety that's like, is that piece good? is my foot on that hold right?
Yeah.
You know, that's like informing you that you need to pay close attention, and then sort of that bad anxiety that almost takes your attention away from something really important.
Yeah,
right?
it's definitely a balance, and it's hard because I think the obsessive part of the anxiety helps with like being committed to working on a route and not giving up. But I also feel like I definitely get trapped in the thoughts, the negative thoughts of like I'm not good enough, and I like spiral, and things trigger me all the time, and like I get in this terrible headspace.
And
so.
it's this ongoing, just like training has to keep happening if you want to increase your level or stay at a level. It's like once you figure something out, maybe it isn't necessarily figured out forever.
Yes.
Right? So it's like the ongoing process.
That's what
and
I
your
had to
belief
learn
and-
now. That's what I had to learn now because like seeing a new therapist and getting the help that I needed for things that maybe I just didn't solve like in the past, but I feel like there's always something that comes up that you're like, oh, I need to address this. So
We
it's
can all relate to
ongoing.
that. There's always something else. Damn it. But Molly Mitchell, there is something else.
Yeah.
And it is, you haven't climbed here since you were like 12 years old. It's time to come back to Yosemite. Shouldn't Molly come back and apply that same skills and get the monkey call? Give it the monkey call. Ooh, ooh, ooh. So the question is, silence monkeys, 1 second. But but Molly, that is the monkey call. You're familiar with that, maybe,
Oh,
right?
I am,
Yeah,
yeah.
that is like. that is-
Actually, Zach did that when I was sending, and it was so awesome. Yeah,
that is a form of love for the monkeys.
Yeah.
But we do want to know is when are you coming back to Yosemite and what might you want to climb? I mean, because there is so much here.
There's rock climbing here?
There's a little bit of rock climbing here, right? Maybe like Free Rider or like Lurking Fear or the Zodiac
Yeah.
or the Dawn Wall or
Yeah.
It's waiting.
Well, I don't know. I'm really into those second female ascents, so.
All right, then we have to have, what's the first female ascent that's waiting for its second? We'll figure this out at
We'll
the break.
figure it out,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're going to figure this out. Thank you, Molly Mitchell.
Thank
a round of
you.
applause for Molly Mitchell.
Thank
Yeah, Molly Mitchell. Okay, so we have, ooh.
Thank you. Oh. What is
I
this?
love the monkey
Oh,
thing.
that's
It
not
never
mine.
gets old. Only we do. Okay,
Hey.
so we have
Thanks.
10 minutes, a quick 10-minute break, and then we'll be right back with Enoch Glidden. Grab yourself a beer, grab yourself a bathroom break. 10 minutes, people. And this just in, Molly Mitchell is indeed signing posters right here, right now. Everybody needs a poster for their van or for their Subaru or for their bivy cave. And they are free, and she's signing them right here, sending the gnarly crux. Come and get your Molly Mitchell poster right now. Come and meet Molly. She's right here. The line forms right here. Molly, get over here. Molly Mitchell. Hello, we're back. We're back. Are you guys back? Everybody that's in their seat right now, say hello to me. Hello. Hi. Hi, seat people. I love that you're like compliant. You're ready. You're eager for Enoch Glidden's speech, right? You're ready to do this. So what I'd love for you guys to do that are paying attention to me right now, it's this beautiful sound of S and H coming together. It's like, or shut up, but on three, we give the SH on three. 1, 2, 3. And then on three, let's give it even a little more bolder and louder. 1, 2, 3, which is ironic. Okay, so Molly Mitchell, a round of applause for Molly Mitchell's show right now. Yes, we love you, Molly Mitchell. And this line right now is going to follow Molly Mitchell outside with these posters, and we're going to continue the signing out here because the show must go on. Thank you, Molly Mitchell. And then everybody that wants a poster too, she's going, follow her right now, and then you'll come right back in for Enoch Glidden's show. All right, so we're going to keep motoring on. For those of you who are still in the back talking about wonderful things, like what you accomplished today. 1, 2, 3. Okay, if you were on stage right now, you would want everybody's total attention, so thank you so much for giving it back. Our next presenter I met back in the Gunks. Anybody here been to the Shawana Gunks? The Gunks, a storied climbing area back in New York, upstate, a couple hours north of the city. Amazing, really wild trad climbing there. I was one of the founders of a group called Paradox Sports. I have a brother who's paralyzed from the waist down. Sean and I, with the help of many Yosemite climbers, have climbed El Capitan 3 times. Sean doing pull-ups up the rope, thousands of them over the course of days and days. That work with Sean introduced me to working with individuals, not only in the United States, but all over the world. At Facelift last year, we had a young climber from Italy, Lola, and she had sustained an injury where she became paralyzed from the waist down while ice climbing. She came back to climb the Zodiac. We had 30 climbers from Facelift show up in the morning and carried her to the base of the Zodiac in like 30 minutes using one of the litters. It was amazing, people coming together. So I met Enoch Glidden. Yes, awesome, so good. I met Enoch Glidden at an event in the Schwanagunks, and we're hanging out, and this guy exudes this amazing joy and this carefree zest for life, and he's like, I'm going to climb El Cap one day. And I'm like, dude, that's huge. And he goes, I know. And guess what happened? He climbed El Cap one day. Amazing. So through that little seed of, again, Molly Mitchell being guided when she was 12 years old, of Enoch Glidden having his first adaptive climbing experience with Paradox Sports at the Schwanagunks, amazing and massive things take place. Please welcome to the Yosemite Facelift stage, dear friend, Enoch Glidden. All right, he's unlocked. All good. Awesome, brother.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So how does a guy who's born with spina bifida, come from the middle of the woods in northern Maine, end up being in the same lineup with Tommy Caldwell at Yosemite Facelift? I've been trying to figure that out all week. And I think the Beatles might have said it best. I did it with a little help from my friends. So growing up in a small town as a kid in a wheelchair, you end up realizing pretty quickly that you need to adapt and you need to ask for help when some of those everyday challenges tend to get in the way. And that's my mom with me in those pictures. I ended up having 56 operations or so before the age of 13. And she was always there, sleeping in my room and taking care of me. And then when I came home, I had another amazing community, the community of Patton, Maine. And so everybody knew me because I was the only kid in the wheelchair. And so there was always someone there to lend a hand when I needed it. So one of those people who was in my community was one of my best friends, Nick Hall. And Nick and I grew up together, obviously, went to school, went to church together, and sometimes got in trouble together. So one incident I remember, we were sitting at the top of the ramp at school, and the teacher told us to get off the ramp. So we did. When she turned her back, where did we go? Right back to the ramp. So Nick decided he was going to try to push me as fast as he could down the ramp. The ramp had two sections, and there was one turn in the middle. So at the bottom of the first section, there is a top railing and a middle railing. The middle railing happened to be missing. Nick decided to take off and didn't tell me that he was going to let go. I'm 2 seconds from taking that top railing to the throat and realized I'm on my own. I reached out, grabbed the top railing, pulled the wheelie, and shot clean through the hole. Landed in a snowbank perfectly. And just as I took flight, the teacher turned around. And there went 3 weeks of recess for us. So Nick is actually also the person that inspired me to get into climbing. But we'll get back to him in a minute. This is Bob Dyer. Bob was my phys ed teacher in junior high at a time when inclusivity wasn't really a thing in schools. Kids with disabilities would usually be put in special ed classes. They actually tried to do that with me in the 3rd grade, even though I was getting all A's. My mother didn't really like that idea and made sure that did not happen. So the first time I met Bob, he walked up to me and he said, "Can you do 20 push-ups in your wheelchair?" So me being me, I said, "I can do 40." And I pulled it off. My arms were absolutely on fire because I don't think I'd ever done 40 push-ups in my life up to that point. But I didn't tell him that my arms were on fire, and he didn't expect less of me after that. He pushed me to get into everything else that the other kids were doing. I got into skiing. I actually got into wheelchair racing and won the main marathon 3 times. But there's a caveat to that. See, now when I say it that way, I sound awesome. But I was the only wheelchair. I actually was the only wheelchair basically in New England racing at that time. So I won a lot. And then later on in life, I tried paragliding, skydiving, started taking flying lessons. I haven't quite got my license yet, but I'm still working on it. But I think Bob instilled something in me by not treating me like I was in a wheelchair. It let me believe that anything was possible and that I could do anything. And I absolutely believe that's true. If you try, things will happen. And you can keep trying until you succeed. So remember Nick Hall. He eventually became a rescue ranger at Mount Rainier. And he was performing his duties as a rescue ranger and reached for the helicopter. And unfortunately, he missed. And he lost his life that day. So I went on Facebook and I looked at all the amazing places that climbing and adventure had taken him, and all of his pictures were absolutely breathtaking. And I decided that I had to see those places for myself, not just through pictures, but I wanted to sit on top of that mountain and see that valley and see that view with my own eyes. So how does a guy in a wheelchair get to the top of a mountain? Well, I went to Google, because Google knows everything, and I found Paradox Sports. And I realized that they had a trip to the Gunks that year. Timmy already told you about it, but I'll tell you again. So I signed up immediately, and that weekend I met a lot of amazing people. And I found another amazing community, the climbing community. And I made a lot of friends that weekend who were all in to help me reach my goals and help everyone else reach their goals. It was the most exciting weekend of my life because I had found my people. I think that's what happened. So one of those people was Sean O'Neill, and I started talking to Sean, and he taught me a lot of the techniques that I use to climb today. And we also realized that we only lived about an hour apart. So that came in really handy when I needed to train for El Cap. Because, as Timmy said, he has done El Cap 3 times and has a laundry list of adaptive achievements. So we started talking and realized that after doing the little climbs and the gunks, and which were good for learning the basics, but I realized that I wanted to go bigger. So I started talking to another friend, Nate McKenzie, that I met also on the gunks. He's a guide for Paradox Sports. And we started talking about places that I might be able to do an adaptive climb that would allow me to go multi-pitch. So we decided on Cathedral Ledge in North Conway, New Hampshire. And it works out that there's a road to the top of that ledge. So we drove to the top, tied off on that fence, and rappelled to the bottom. So if anybody of you happen to know that I have a blog and a website, it's called Go Beyond the Fence. Well, that's the fence. So we rappelled to the bottom, and we get to the bottom, and Nate says, well, buddy, I hope you're ready to climb because the only way out of here is up. And I'm thinking to myself, you could have told me that in the car. But 6 hours later, and a massive amount of pull-ups, my arms and my shoulders were absolutely toast. but we made it to the top. And I realized that moment that I felt that feeling of accomplishment that you get from putting your all into something. And then I knew I really loved doing big climbs. So I decided that I wanted to go even bigger. Danica Gilbert also works for Paradox Sports, helping them write grants and things. And she contacted me one day and asked me if I wanted to write a grant for any adventure I wanted. And we threw around some ideas. And one of them was going to Alaska to go skiing. But we realized that the grants were going to pay out after that ski trip. By the way, I still went on the ski trip because it's skiing in Alaska. But we wrote a Challenged Athletes Foundation grant and an American Alpine Club Live Your Dream grant, and I got both. So now it was game on. I called Sean, and I said, I have these grants, and I want to climb El Cap. I need to train, and I need you to teach me. So I went over to Sean's house, and pretty much every day for a year that the weather would allow, I was climbing his tree with a rope. Sean actually put that rope up by himself. He girth hitched the tree and climbed up there by himself and put that rope up for me with an anchor at the top there. It was 32 feet to the anchor. And I just went over there and did as many pitches as I could every day. We tried for at least 10 pitches a day, so about 320 feet, which equaled out to probably 600 pull-ups. And then we went over systems, we went over portal edge living, and he tried to teach me as much as he could. So a year later, I set off for Yosemite, home of some of the best granite and the best climbers in the world. And I remember that moment coming through that tunnel. When you see that view, I instantly teared up, and I still do, every time I come through there. So I was able to live with Yosar, don't tell the Rangers, and and so I actually lived with them for 5 weeks, and I got to know a lot of the people in the Yosemite climbing community and a lot of the people that have climbed El Cap 30 or 40 times a piece. And I started talking to them, and I realized I did not know enough to climb El Cap. And I had not taken into consideration what it was going to be like to live on a portal edge as a person with a disability. I hadn't taken into consideration, I only knew how to tie one knot. So when the 5th week came around, we decided to change the objective, and I climbed Osterman on the column. And we went up about 800 feet and set up the portal edge for the night. So I got to learn what that experience was like and got to learn basically what it would be like to climb a bell wall. And this picture right here on the right is a little roof that I had to get around, and that actually was kind of one of the biggest accomplishments I made on that climb, because I did it by myself, and I basically had to do one-arm pull-ups and then push off, and then do a pull-up and push off to get around it. And that was one of those other moments where you put all your effort into something and you accomplish your goal, and it was kind of a big moment for me on that one. Another thing I found in this valley was another community, the Yosemite climbing community. And the Yosemite climbing community is a different kind of climbing community. None of them saw me as a person in a wheelchair. They saw me as a climber. And they saw me as someone who was not prepared. So they said, you can't climb El Cap. And I was totally disappointed, of course, because I came here with that goal in mind, and I had lived that goal for a year. But I realized they were right. And it was because of them that I learned a lot more. And coming here was, for that first year, was more valuable than anything I could have ever done, because I found that community that was all in to do whatever it took to help me get up El Cap. They didn't just say you're not prepared, they helped me prepare. And then, when it came time to climb Astroman, we didn't have enough people to carry me. So we just walked around Camp 4 and asked random people. And the next morning, there was 15 people standing in the parking lot waiting to carry me. And that's what the Yosemite climbing community is. We're all here to help each other. Even though we're all probably working on first ascents and trying to do big climbs, we're all here to also support each other. And that's really what I found, was a supportive community. So during my climb, let's go back one, the man in the orange shirt there, that's Craig Murdelak. He filmed the entire thing and made a movie about it. So I'd like to show you a short version of that movie now, so you can see what it was like to do an adaptive climb of Zodiac.
Morning. Man of the hour.
There was this bird with one leg. I realized that no one is ever going to tell that bird that it's disabled. It will just live its life and continue doing what it does, not knowing anything is different. I was born with spina bifida, which left me paralyzed from the waist down. Basically, I was born with a hole in my back, and then the spine grew through it, and it pinched off my spinal cord. And then I spent 3 months in the hospital waiting to die, and then I didn't. I got into climbing through an organization called Paradox Sports that does human-powered outdoor activities. And I have a lifelong dream of climbing El Capitan. I met Sean through Paradox Sports. He has been helping me learn everything I need to know before I get there.
I've been there. I've climbed El Cap. I've experienced the rewards. A lot of those are beyond words. Anything I can do to help Enoch achieve some of that, is my great pleasure, my great privilege. It's not realistic to expect the mission to succeed. What is realistic is to give it your best shot. That's just let it play out. And however it plays out is a beautiful thing. A normal climbing experience, everybody's given about the same amount. But if you're part of a disabled team, you got to be ready to give 110%.
Feeling pretty motivated to get up there,
I knew right off the bat, I have to do this. I want to be part of this.
It's part of adaptive climbing is adapting the gear so it works for us. In order to get Enoch from here to there, we're asking a lot of people to do something they otherwise probably wouldn't want to do. We're just gonna have to ask around and see who out of the kindness of their heart is willing to step out and come forth.
I think in an ideal world, we have at least 8 people coming in to help carry.
I don't have any doubt. No doubt. Cause I'm just a girl. Oh, what's my destiny? Oh, I've succumbed to what's making me dumb. I've had it up to here.
It took a massive amount of people to pull this experience off. And before I came here, I didn't realize it would take that many people. I'm nervous, but I'll be alright. It's just dragging a rope.
I feel like El Cap is the ultimate metaphor for doing something that has no practical application, except that if you work together and you stay safe,
Thank you.
that nothing else can really hurt you. You got the sun, the moon, stars. It's a reason to stay alive.
Look at that. Made that crux look easy.
Woo! Second day.
So,
Yes,
we are basically officially at the point of no return.
I know.
So what that means,
Does repeller go? I don't know, I feel pretty weak and sick. I don't want to stop, but I don't want to get up there and then want to stop.
this is the make or break moment. Once we get above this, like there's no going back that way.
Well, I don't want to quit, but I don't want to put us all in a situation where it's way more complicated to get down.
We just need you to be, honest with yourself. And if you're not feeling it, you're not feeling it. Up or down?
I don't know. We're going up.
Wall climbing's hard enough. Enoch, I don't know what you did, but yeah, you definitely flipped a switch today. And you've been like fierce and nonstop. Like literally ever since then, you haven't hesitated.
I think I was only thinking about bailing because I knew I could, and now I can't, so now I'm not thinking about it. Getting past that was really difficult. You think about all the things, like, what if I can't make it? I should bail right now.
2 more days, and it's gonna be a battle. Have we seriously been up here for 4 days?
Yes.
Here you are.
Yep, 38 years later.
38 years later, and you're up on a freaking wall.
Still almost kicking.
Still almost. I'm definitely looking forward to it.
I am definitely looking forward to topping out. Mostly so I can get a shower.
One more pitch and we're at the very, very top.
A year ago, I didn't think this was going to happen. Now I'm going to do it. Well, I think a lot of times when I climb, I get quiet. And the smaller problems of daily life seem so dreamlike. Climbing, it's all immediate. You're thinking about what has to happen right now.
You got some progress. It's gonna be hard.
I gotta make the next 5 feet.
Nice, 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 nice.
I can't go 5 feet unless I go 1 foot. It's just not over. I can't go a foot unless I go an inch. Thank you so much.
What are some things that you think you're gonna take away from this?
The memories of working with you guys and becoming closer as time went on.
Come on. This is the 3,000th pull.
This is the 3,000th right here.
1, 2, 3.
You're topping out El Cap right now. There it is. There it is. There it is.
The challenging part of climbing the gap is that it hurts. That's a way of confronting what life is all about.
Welcome, dude. Oh, come here. How good is it, man?
I feel that my heart was there the whole time. It felt good to like work so hard for someone else.
He's letting go of a lot, but I think when you're in good company, then the rest is just having a good time.
People see me climb, they realize that there's no such thing as impossible. You just need to ask for help.
Slowly but surely, we're making our way down.
To me, this was like an opportunity to see another side of climbing, to see people give everything they have to help someone else realize their dream.
You climb the mountain to come down and climb more mountains. If you can inspire somebody along the way, really that's all that matters.
You stuck with it today.
Well, you guys definitely stuck with it. Neither did I. I was tied down.
You were restrained.
All right, give it up to Enoch Glidden. Enoch Glidden.
Just a little bit, yeah. So you saw so first, you're the only audience that's ever laughed at that still almost kicking joke. No one ever gets that. So next year, I'm finally going to complete my mission of honoring my friend Nick and climbing Mount Rainier next June. I'm also planning a rim to rim of the Grand Canyon on a hand cycle. And my ultimate goal is to lead a big wall by myself. So if anybody wants to help, maybe Patagonia or Cliff, you can go to my website and get a hold of me. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Enoch. Thank you, Enoch Glidden. Enoch Glidden. Yeah. So we're going to take some questions for Enoch, if anybody has any questions out there. And Enoch, I have a question for you. So a life in a wheelchair, right,
Yep.
or soon after in a chair, and that's sort of like this life of hardship,
Yep.
right? A life of difficulty that is not voluntarily being chosen.
Sure.
And voluntarily you're in it. How did that prepare you for sort of that same thing of voluntarily choosing to make it really hard by climbing El Cap?
I think for some reason I've always craved challenge. Instead of shying away from it, when I was little, I would push my wheelchair through the woods to see how far I could get. And if I got stuck, I'd get out of my wheelchair and just pull it and keep on going. So I think challenge has just always been something that made me happy.
I can tell because the smile on your face as you talk about climbing El Capitan, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like, making life hard on purpose. Welcome to the climbing community, right? This is what everybody
Like
hears,
I-
like, where's the crux?
Like I
I'm
said,
so thirsty.
I found my
I'm
community.
starving. I'm super gripped. I've never been happier. Enoch Glidden's life, dude. You've been waiting to come
I'm
in.
finally found it.
Welcome. Any questions out there for Enoch Glidden? Anybody got a question? Hands in the air. So Enoch, yeah, right there. Go for it. And the question is what's your special mentality or what's your special mind? How do you prepare psychologically to help you get through these things?
So you saw that one scene in the movie where I'm spinning in midair and I'm about 1,000 feet off the ground, 40 feet from the wall. and the wind is just catching me, and I can't do anything about it. So I just started staring at the rope, and I find that I can usually go within myself, and I just focus on what needs to happen next, because I can't do anything about what's happening now. I just can focus on what's happening next, and that usually will just get me to the next step.
And what if you're like looking at the rope and then you see little fibers of rope coming down? And then you look up the rope and you see the rope rubbing on rock. Then what do? Stop looking at the rope. Then start looking down below.
Right. Enjoy that last moment.
Enjoy that last moment of life with your friends on El Capitan. Yes. Yes. Great answer. Great answer. You're totally a wall climber. We all love gallows humor. Welcome to the family. Yes, question over here. So the question is how do you deal with overuse issues of the elbows or of your body in general? Like you're already in a chair, moving your arms all the time. How does that work on the wall, and do you have problems with it?
Luckily, so far, I don't have any problems with my joints, but obviously, eventually, if you use something long enough, it's going to break. So it'll probably happen, but I do work out as much as possible, and I train as much as possible. When I did OCAP, I was doing 300 feet an hour in a gym, just whipping up the rope and back down. 7 minutes up, back down, take a drink, back up. So I was pretty ready when I got here.
Prepared. Any other questions for Enoch Glidden over there? Yeah. Last question. Go for it.
Yep. Yep.
So the question is around sensitivity with skin and pressure. The Rojo cushion that was being blown up, did you have any skin issues when you were up on the wall?
No, I actually worked with a company called the Bomb Velvet. Is from the East Coast where I live, and they make chainsaw chaps. So I bought a pair of their chainsaw chaps, and we actually just developed a new set of climbing chaps that I'm using this year, so that I'm able to put my wheelchair seat inside the chaps, and I haven't had any issues since.
And are you planning on bringing a chainsaw on El Capitan? Don't do it, dude.
If it helps. Just stick it in the crack.
Yeah, I'll just make the crack bigger. Dude, that's not allowed in this resource. That's the National Forest. I'm just kidding. No, it's not. But anyway, my question for you, Enoch, is, and this is a classic question, and I'm going to ask it, what is next? What's next? Because you do have your mindset. As it says, we climb the mountain, we come back down to climb the next mountain. Yeah. What is that next mountain?
So I'm currently designing a ski so I can ski up Mount Rainier on fixed ropes, and then I'll ski back down, and then hopefully I'll be going to Grand Canyon to do the rim to rim, and I also want to work on possibly climbing Moonlight Buttress in Zion by myself.
And then I would say, wow, Moonlight Buttress by yourself, I think that's like the raddest thing ever. I want to be there watching you with a telescope for a year and a half as you're up there, dude. So I'm going to have a kid. It's going to be like born and then be a toddler, and then you're going to get to meet it when you finally come down, dude. So you think Tommy Caldwell spent a long time on the Dawn Wall, dude. Wow.
Or maybe I can get him and Alex to set the rope.
Get him and Alex to just keep doing laps past you and feeding you food, baby bird, mama bird style. It's going to be amazing. And then I'm thinking like Nameless Tower in Pakistan. And then like K2 since we're there, dude, right? Why not? Enoch Glidden, anything is possible. Give it up! Awesome. Okay, we're doing a very brief break, very brief beer and bio break. Be back here in 5 minutes for Tommy Caldwell. Get going.
Hello, everybody. We got one more presenter left. I want to let you know we have a designated driver tonight. His name is Matt Bernstein. Is he up here? Matt? Here he is right here. He's going to be out front doing laps. Make sure you guys get back to your campsite or where you need to go. Please don't drive if you've drank a bunch of beer, all right? We've had 2 facelifts with no arrests, and I'd like to make number 3 this time. So also, I want to thank my daughter, Ruby. We left one of the movies. Enoch's movie was left in El Portal. Thank you. And almost showtime, and we realized we didn't have Enoch's movie up here. So my daughter went, and she's a new driver, and she drove it up here for us and made it in time. So thank you, Ruby. She's back there. Stand up, Ruby. Come on. All right. I'm super psyched. My son's here tonight. He just came in from Indianapolis, just got here an hour ago, and his name's Guy. It's right there in the orange shirt. All right. What's so cool about the facelift is that all these kids, all the local kids are here cleaning up the park or coming up to the park to clean. They're our future land stewards. And my kids have been cleaning trash at Facelift for the last 16 years, and they help. But my goal is for these kids, as they turn into adults and become and have families, is that they bring their families up and they actually take this on and do facelifts. If not here, wherever they live. So that's my big goal with this thing. So thank you guys. All right. With that, I'd like to introduce Tommy Caldwell. Please give Tommy a big hand. Thank you.
Nice. Thanks, man. You, Ken Yeager. Yeah. So I've been hanging out in Yosemite for like, I don't know, 38 years now at this point. I've been here kind of a while. And for a really long time, we as climbers were kind of the enemy. Like I felt like the gutter rat kind of in a lot of ways. And in the last 5 or 10 years, that has totally changed. And I think Ken is the reason, really. We're respected here. We're making it happen. We are the de facto caretakers of this park now when the government fails us and it shuts down, and Ken is really the one leading the way, so thank you so much. So my presentation tonight, in typical Tommy Caldwell fashion, everybody thinks I'm like really methodical and planned, but I actually just threw a bunch of slides in a reel like 15 minutes ago, so if I'm slightly surprised at what shows up behind me on the screen, forgive me. But anyways, I've been going all over the world talking about the Dawn Wall for like 4 years now, and I'm a little bit sick about talking about that. So I thought I would do a different show tonight about kind of my new journey, my new adventure, and that's into what I call adventure activism. I've really gotten into environmental work in the past year or so, and in a lot of ways, I was bred for this. My dad was taking me into the mountains when I was really young. This was my 7th birthday on top of Long's Peak. So by the time I was 7 years old, he had convinced me that like hiking through the mountains for 20 hours was a good idea, fun for a 7-year-old. Very effective brainwasher, that man. But it's really informed so much of my life. I mean, I think it's you know his theory behind how you raise children is kind of the way that I'm trying to raise my own children now, although I'm trying to tone it down just a little bit because he did almost kill me off on a lot of occasions when I was a little kid. But really growing up in the mountains and learning to really love nature and learning to love adventure was kind of what I was bred for in a way. He was a mountain guide. And I took that into this world of, I guess, professional climbing. I didn't know, it wasn't really a profession when I was young, actually. It was just something that people came to Yosemite and they climbed and they lived on like, $20 a month and scarfed at the cafeteria, and that's what I aspired to do when I was young. Luckily, it's taken a little bit of a different turn since then, and I've been able to actually make quite a good go of it. But a lot of my time was spent just coming here and really thinking in this very single-minded way about coming here and testing my own limits, figuring out what I'm capable of, And it's been wonderful. Like, I think in everybody's life, there's really should be as long a period of possible about kind of discovering yourself. And being self is actually a really good thing, because that's when you sort of build yourself up enough so ultimately you can eventually give that back to people. It took me a lot of years to start thinking about giving back to people, but that's what I'm trying to do now. So climbing on El Cap has been a wonderful thing, but relatively self-serving. That started to change when I started to have kids. Love this photo. Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. I guess I'm not supposed to move. So having kids, I do love my daughter, Ingrid, more than I love my rope. But thank you, Edorid, for bringing me here today, by the way. But it started to change when I have kids, because the thing that happened is when you have children, you start to think of not only your own life, but you think about their lives and kind of the duration of their lives. And once you're thinking about the duration of their lives, you think about their kids, and it gives you this very long view of the world. So I think my life as a, kind of self-centered climber started to change. When I had kids, this guy right here, Kevin Jorgensen, also played a big role in that. I think I always thought of my climbing objectives as something that I wanted to personally succeed. When I climbed the Dawn Wall with Kevin, it really helped me start to think about collaboration and what it means to actually team up with somebody. And this experience on the Dawn Wall showed me that when you are willing to do that, the sky's the limit. I mean, there are so many things about that climb that I never would have been able to do on my own. I actually tried on my own on several occasions, and I just couldn't make it happen. And Kevin, the collaboration, the competitiveness, the brotherhood that we had was really what enabled me to do something that was just far and above anything I could ever have imagined for my life. The other guy that helped me figure out that collaboration was really a good thing was this guy right here, Alex Arnold. I always got to show this photo because it's certainly the only photo in existence where I look like more of a badass than Alex Arnold. Looks like I'm guiding him in that photo. Which to be fair, I actually kind of was on the fifth traverse. But that's the only time that's happened. This is probably a better photo to represent our climbing relationship. He looks like he just got out of the shower. I'm like bloodied and totally beat up. But I think one thing that Alex taught me is that there's a lot of power in finding somebody that's just so badass that you can kind of just draft behind them. And the world just kind of feels like it's at your fingertips in that sort of situation. And so, although my show is a little bit about adventure activism today, I thought I'd talk a little bit about climbing. Last fall, and I thought I'd tie it in because climbing is what has given me the platform to be an activist nowadays. And so doing things like the Dawn Wall certainly helped. Climbing with Alex certainly helps. Last fall, we got together to speed climb El Cap. And, Alex had just free soloed the free rider. Everybody in here knows that, right? I would imagine. And so he was like in really good shape. I wasn't in good shape at all. I had been like traveling around doing too many events. But I'd really had enough experience with Alex that I know when I team up with him, the mountains somehow seemed to shrink to about half their size. I had never been interested in speed climbing. I figured it was probably a bit too dangerous, and it was just kind of a weird game. But anytime Alex wants to do something, I kind of can't resist. He's kind of like my drug dealer of risk. He like dangles that little baggie in front of my face, and he's like, "It's gonna be so good." and then I take a little hit, and turns out it's pretty good. But anyways, he wanted to go speed climbing on the nose because of Brad Goldbright, which I think is. Are you still here in this room tonight, Brad? Yes, Brad. Yes, the dark horse. Alex thought he was so invincible, and then Brad made him second guess that for a moment. for a brief moment. Brad and Jim, everybody knows, they went and climbed the nose in 2 hours and 17 minutes a few years ago, and that drove Alex freaking crazy. He couldn't believe that he didn't have the record on the nose for a brief moment, so he called me up. and we started lapping the nose, and I really found the beauty in drafting off of Alex. We started with a pretty normal rack of gear, a double set of cams, and then he would always be like, do you really think we need this piece? I think we can pull this one out. Maybe we only need one Jumar. And by the time we had climbed the nose a dozen or so times, we had it down to this, which is kind of. I think this is probably still more gear than you brought, though, Brad. Is that right? How many cams did you have? Oh yeah, no micro traction, so we're still quite heavy, I guess. But that's because I'm a father. I got to keep it safety first. But yeah, anyways, I think we had like 20, like 16 draws, 20 beaners, and 7 cams, and a couple devices, and 1 Jumar in the end. That's all we ended up taking, and that was kind of crazy because that wasn't just what we needed to climb a pitch. That's what we needed to climb like half the route. That's the only rack I had, and we climbed the first half of El Cap up to Boot Flake in one pitch. So it was definitely walking that line of what I thought was responsible to do as a father. But I don't actually remember what slide is next, so this is going to be a bit of a surprise to me. Oh yeah, cool. So I thought I'd show you this cool time lapse that we have of speed climbing the nose, and I'm going to try and walk you through it. So we ended up climbing it, I think, 11 or 12 times over about a month-long period. And it was kind of a cool thing for me because I showed up like dreadfully out of shape and with terrible tendinitis because I had been remodeling my house and doing a lot of plumbing work, and I had like worked this horrible tendinitis. So before I drove to Yosemite, I was like, dude, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. It seems like I'm out of shape. I've got tendinitis. I'm not really sure if it's going to work. And he was like, just come and we'll just like climb it slow and safe and we'll see how it works. So we came to Yosemite. We climbed the nose on our first day here. Took us like 4.5 hours or something. And I was like, well, it kind of hurt, but we'll see how it goes tomorrow. And I woke up the next morning. And I was like, oh, that's strange. It feels kind of a little bit better. So we climbed the nose another day, second day in a row. And then after that day, I was like, wow, it feels even better yet. That's so weird. And then so we climbed it 3 days in a row, and it was gone. It cured my tendinitis completely. It's never come back. So any of you guys that suffer from tendinitis, that's the secret. Climb the nose on a daily basis. Now, I think there is something to that. It's something about like a lot of blood pumping through your body and kind of stretching out in hand cracks. I think it actually was pretty good. But anyways, to the time lapse. So this is our eventual, I think this is our record time. The idea was to try and climb it in under 2 hours. We've kind of steadily worked it down from 4 hours to that time. And it was kind of a heavy thing because there's a lot of people thinking that we're being too dangerous. A couple people died while speed climbing during this whole ascent. And it got really heavy at times, but whenever we would start to second guess things, we would kind of slow it down and make sure that we were relatively safe. And I actually do feel like we managed to climb it in a relatively safe fashion. So here's how it went. We started at like 6 o'clock in the morning. I started leading off of the bottom. You can see Alex behind me. We're climbing to Sickle Ledge. We weren't quite this fast, by the way. This is 2 hours. This is 2 hours condensed down into 2 minutes. But we got to Sickle Ledge in 11 minutes. I think that was super fast. And then it was a very social experience, as you can see. There's always parties all over the nose, which generally can be quite a problem. But when you're climbing that fast, people just are psyched and they step out. Especially when you're climbing with Alex Honnold, people just step out of the way and they're like, "Wow!" And we would just like grab their harness, like step on their head, pull through, and somehow they would thank us afterwards. But we got to Dolt Tower in like 32 minutes. I don't actually remember the exact times. Dolt Tower is like 12 pitches up, 11 pitches up or something. There we are climbing to the boot flake. I was pretty slow at the little bit of aid we had to do there. And we got to the top of the boot in I think like 56 minutes or something like that. And that was my block. That's what I had to use that gear for. And then you can see Alex did the king swing, and he swung across, and then we simul-climbed all that stuff. And then we simul-climbed all the way until I got about halfway up the great roof, and then we switched to short fixing. So short fixing was a good technique for us because it allowed me to just Jumar and be completely safe, while Alex had to climb with a 100-foot death loop of rope at all times, and that allowed us to go really fast through the top half of the route. I think I still climbed to boot flake slower than Brad. So all of the time that we made up was basically drafting. What's that? Oh, 3 minutes faster. Oh, yes. Yes, nice. I feel better about myself. So anyways, we climbed up. We got to the great roof. We short fixed kind of like half of the top section. It was this interesting mix of short fixing and simul climbing. And then we got, there Alex is climbing up the top. I think when Brad and Jim did it, Brad was following and he actually caught up to Jim. Did you end up passing him on the way to the top? Yeah. Anyways, I didn't catch up to Alex. I got to the top 1 minute after Alex, and we managed to do it in under 2 hours. So 1 hour, 57 minutes, and 7 seconds. Cool. Which was sweet, and it was people were like, oh, it's like the 2 hour marathon of climbing. Like, could this actually happen? And we did it. And then when we got to the top, I remember one day Alex did this calculation. He was like, well, the World Cup speed climbers climb a 50-foot wall in 5 seconds. So we are climbing like 1/12 the speed of those guys. So it can certainly be done a lot faster than that. So, yeah, we'll see if that happens anytime soon. Anyways, climbing things like this has given me a bit of a platform. It's given me a bit of a voice, and I've been, as a father, trying to become a responsible human being. But for a long time, I didn't think that I really had a voice that could make a difference. I mean, what does one person's voice make? What can we do as climbers? But then a few years ago, the Access Fund and the American Alpine Club invited me to this event called Climb the Hill, where they took a bunch of climbers to Washington, D.C., and they organized meetings all over the place, and we started meeting with senators and Congress people and the staffers. And at first I was like, this is dumb, like, why are we doing this? They're definitely not gonna listen to a bunch of climbers. We live in such a different world. But I realized a couple things on this trip. One is, a secret of DC is this country is run by the staffers. The actual elected officials only make the top level decisions. And climbing's so popular that most of those staffers are climbers. So we could relate to these guys, and they love talking to us. And I've gone back several years since, and now we actually do get meetings with the politicians, with the elected officials. And the other thing I realized is that most people come into the office and they talk about policy, and the politicians' eyes kind of roll back in their head because that's what they hear all day, every day. We come to DC and we mostly talk about climbing, and they're so excited about it. And so now when I go back, I meet with these elected officials, and they're like super psyched to see me and Alex and Sasha DeJulian, and they hang out for extra time. They like blow off their extra meetings. They all come and party with us. And we're like, wow, in this very strange world that I never actually wanted to be a part of, we do have quite a bit of influence. And once you realize that, you kind of, it seems kind of too good to pass up to try and do good in this world. So that's kind of been my new adventure, is diving into this. Awesome. Right on. So once I decided that I had a voice, the next thing I knew that I had to do was get educated. Didn't even graduate high school. I did graduate high school, but I kind of cheated my way through it, so it didn't really count. And so, once I'm meeting with politicians, I'm like, talking about environmental issues was primarily what I was passionate about. I felt like I really needed to get educated, so I read a lot of books, and then I started to really look at the world around me in this different way. And I'd been climbing in the mountains my whole life, but I think that things were changing, but I just kind of took it for granted until I started to understand the science behind what's going on. And I understood that when you go to Patagonia these days and you have these 12-day weather windows, whereas when I was young, they were usually only one day long, or when these mountains have all this rockfall because they're melting out for the first time in my lifetime, it really can be attributed to mass climate change, and this stuff is really happening. This is a pretty close to home example. This is El Cap 4 years ago. That's Alex, my wife, Becca, myself, and some random dude, I don't know who that is, standing in front of El Cap 4 years ago. This is last year. So things are changing pretty quickly, even close to home like this. We know that beetle kill kind of killed about a third of the trees in Yosemite Valley, and it's partially because there's too many straws in the pond. There's a lot of trees here right now, and it's sucking all the water out of the ground, and they're drying out and being more susceptible to beetles, but it's also because there's just not enough moisture. Climbing the Dawn Wall was a really great example of this. We ended up finishing the route on January 15th, and it hadn't even stormed yet that year, which was really lucky for us. But it's not right. Like, that shouldn't happen. When I was coming here as a kid, you never could have climbed El Capitan in December or January. So when you start to look at this stuff as a climber, you realize that things are changing. I think that we are the eyes and the ears of the mountains. Climbers have the most intimate relationship with the mountain landscape of really anybody. So they're going to notice it more than anybody else, and therefore we can become the spokespeople. And politicians seem to listen to that. I started to try and figure out how to combine this world of lobbying and talking to politicians with climbing, because they felt very different at first. Like, I would go to DC, I'd put on a suit, which just felt wrong. I would study the bills, and it felt like one thing, and then going climbing felt like a completely different thing. But last year I started to think, I wonder if there's a way that I could combine these two things. And so I started to look for opportunities for what I call adventure activism. About 10 years ago, I went on a trip to the Gates of the Arctic National Park with the late Hayden Kennedy, dear friend of mine, and we had this mind-blowing experience. We went to climb a mountain called Mount Xanadu, and it's in northern Alaska. And we flew in there in April when there was still a lot of snow on the ground. We landed in a ski plane on this snowfield, and then we skied through the night under 40 below temperatures, aurora borealis like going off over our heads, and through a herd of about 2,000 caribou that was being tracked by these white wolves. And we also saw grizzly bears, and we spent about a week in this zone in the Gates of the Arctic National Park, and it kind of changed my life in a way, because it was certainly the most impactful wildlife experience I had ever been on in my life. And so last year, I learned that the area just adjacent to that, the National Arctic Wildlife Refuge, had been opened up in President Trump's tax funding bill. He had kind of slid it into this tax funding bill to open it up to drilling. It's been a fight that's been going on for 40 years. And, with the way that politics works, he almost kind of like snuck it in there, and all of a sudden, this fight that we've been fighting got lost, essentially. And it got opened up to drilling. Anwar, a lot of people know it as Anwar. I don't call it that because the tribes think that's a disrespectful name in the area. And so when I learned about this, I was like, man, if this place is anything like the Gates of the Arctic, it definitely deserves being protected. And so I decided I was going to put together a trip and try and go up there and learn about this place so that I could come back and speak in terms of trying to protect it. So put together this awesome trip with this super badass guy on the left here. That's Austin Sidak. one of the coolest photographers. He lives in Yosemite probably 3 or 4 months a year. And 2 ultra runners. That's Claire Gallagher in second from the left, and Luke Nelson on the right. This trip, the thing about the Arctic Wildlife Refuge as a climber is it doesn't have big walls, but it does have big mountains. But I knew that I needed pain in my life because I'd been doing too many events, and so I was like, I want to go on a trip where we cover as much distance as we can every day, and the best way to do that was with ultra runners. So I went there with, and yeah, Claire, by the way, has won both the Leadville 100 and the Western States 100, so such a badass. As well as being the most probably hard-driving, passionate environmentalist I know of. And Luke is really very similar. And Austin, as well as being a great photographer, is probably one of the deeper thinkers I know. But anyways, I put together this awesome group of people. Figure you can't do anything without great friends. So I found my best friends, and we decided to go check this place out. But I figured that if I was going to go and speak about trying to protect the place, I needed to really understand not only what the natural environment was like, but also the people that really relied on that land the most. And so we went to this summit in Fort Yukon, Alaska. It's called the Arctic Indigenous Climate Summit. Just so happened to be this last summer, and we met with all the tribal elders from all the different tribes in northern Alaska, a bunch of climate scientists, and we had this full immersion in sort of that of tribal Alaskan culture. And I didn't expect this to be as moving as it was. One of the coolest experiences about this is they took us through this exercise called decolonization training. And what they did is they stuck this drum in the middle of a circle of people, and they told all the kids to gather around the drum. And then they told all the elders to gather around the kids. And then they had everybody else gather around the elders. And they said, this represents what our lives looked like. This is what our healthy ecosystem was before basically white men came and disrupted our scene. And so the drum represented their spirituality, and then basically that's kind of how their system worked. And so they had us all get in this configuration, and then they said, how does everybody feel? They started asking people, like, how do you feel right now? And they'd be like, oh, I feel safe, I feel protected, I feel happy, I feel like I'm in community. And then they went and they said, okay, this drum represents our spirituality, and they took it away, and they're like, that's the first thing that happened. Our spirituality went out the window. Then they would ask us again, how do you feel? And then people are like, oh, I start to feel a little bit uneasy. And then they came and they took like 90% of the kids out of the circle. And all of a sudden you feel this like emptiness. You're like, man, what is life like without children? There's not that much laughter. This is what happens, because what we did is we came and we sent all their kids to boarding schools. And then they took like half the elders away, and they're like, and then half of our elders died of disease. It was a pretty heavy exercise in a lot of ways. But they kind of just walked us through this, and you started to realize why these tribes have a lot of alcoholism. Like, we've wronged them terribly, and I started to realize that this fight for the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge wasn't just about the nature. It wasn't about the natural environment. It was really this like social justice issue. And so it made me even more passionate about it, because the deal with the people that live in Fort Yukon is they have a little bit of money that is mostly comes from the oil industry, but they don't get that much money, and a gallon of milk costs like $12 in Fort Yukon. So what they live off of is the caribou herd. There's 10,000 caribou that live in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. They bird there. This is what these people live their lives on. And so they really, really don't want the oil companies to come in and turn it into an oil field because they're afraid that they're not going to have food anymore. So it was a pretty moving experience. We spent about a week in Fort Yukon. We hung out with these people. We went through some pretty real deal learning and these like kind of hard experiences like that. We also just partied with them. Turns out they're really good partiers. Every night we would go to their kind of community center and eat really kind of crazy food, like caribou legs that have hair hanging all over them and stuff. And they would play music and kind of rock out, and we'd dance with them. And it was the only time I've been fully immersed in a community that's that tight, because they live in a very remote area. There's not even a road to Fort Yukon. You have to either take the river or an airplane. So these communities become really tight. And we hung out, and then we went into the refuge. One of the things I had heard is that the refuge was total wasteland. Like, there was no reason to protect it. And I kind of knew that this wouldn't be the case, but I wanted to bring back pictures. That's why Austin came, to show people how special this place is. So when we went into the refuge, this is on our way in. This is kind of the first thing we saw, these incredible mountains covered in snow, the Brooks Range, these incredibly intricate braided rivers. All the green area is all permafrost, so it's, about 10 feet thick of actual ice covered by tundra, alpine tundra exactly. And about a quarter of the earth is actually covered in permafrost or peat moss. So it stores a huge amount of carbon. It's a pretty vital part of the ecosystem. And the place was just cool. I knew I wanted to suffer because I just need that in my life. So we had planned this trip to have to travel from one valley that we started in up over this giant mountain range, which the mountain range topped out at only 8,000 feet, but it started at sea level, so the mountains were actually quite big. We had these crazy river crossings to go across. We got in this big storm while we were up there in the middle of the summer, so it still is the Arctic. It wasn't all suffering though. We found the most amazing hot springs I've ever seen in my life in the middle of the Arctic. So that was pretty cool. But I ended up laughing more on this trip than probably any trip I've ever been on in my life. Part of that was because the people I was with were just so ridiculous. But also we felt like this was a really purposeful thing. Like, I've been on climbing trips all over the world for basically the entirety of my life. And this trip felt like a bit more noble in an interesting way, and I think that brought out this joy in us. We climbed this mountain in the background called Mount Hubli. It's the second highest mountain in the Brooks Range. And then we hiked and slid down the fastest receding glacier in the world, the Hubli Glacier. And then we pack rafted out onto the 1002 area, which is the specific area that is slated to be drilled. So this right here is what would be drilled. This is the 1002 area. And that's a herd of, about, I don't know, we saw certainly thousands of caribou. This year they were kind of spread out, but on certain years, all the caribou, all 10,000 of them will actually herd together. And if you witness this, it's a pretty amazing thing, because it looks like the entire land is just moving along. But this is probably one of the bigger groups of caribou that we saw in one grouping here. And it doesn't really look like wasteland to me. It's pretty beautiful nature. I would say that this place actually redefined wilderness to me. Like I said, I've been all over the place, but in the Arctic Wildlife Refuge, the animals seem more healthy. Mass industrialization is so far away. We had this pretty cool encounter with this wolf right here. That's not even taken with a zoom lens. We were kind of hiding down in this hole eating lunch one day when this wolf just popped its head over the corner, over the edge of the hole. And I instinctively grabbed our bear spray expecting some kind of altercation, but it didn't try to attack us. It didn't act aggressive at all. It just was purely curious. And it occurred to me that this wolf has probably never seen humans before. It has no reason to be afraid of them. And you can see in this photo, it's like incredibly wild. Its coat is really healthy. I have a closer up picture where you can actually see there's blood kind of staining its snout, because it obviously spent the day with its nose like tucked in some carcass somewhere. But it was just this like amazingly wild, absolutely beautiful animal. And so we spent our time in this really intact ecosystem, but while the Arctic is still wild, so the area of the Earth that is warming the fastest. The poles are warming faster. The Arctic is actually already past that 3 degrees Celsius of global warming threshold that they say they basically say when the planet reaches 3 degrees of Celsius, everything's, we're all going to perish essentially. And the Arctic is already there. So we saw around the rivers the permafrost melting and collapsing. Like I said before, we hiked down the fastest receding glacier in the world. So it's this weird dichotomy of absolute wildness, but also very, very affected by a warming planet. So we had this really cool adventure, and we came back, and we have to start telling stories about it. So luckily, our world of climbers has been really stepping up to the plate in these days. Events like Climb the Hill. I also went to another event called POW Climb this year, where we bring all the athletes together and we talk to politicians. This is Senator Schumer, the Senate minority leader. If elections go to the Democrats this next year, he'll be one of the most powerful people in the world. And we show up as climbers, and they want to hang out with us. So we get to hang out with them and talk about things like the Arctic, which is pretty cool. Eric Murdoch from the Access Fund hooked me up with this absolute ninja on this trip, and who knew kind of everybody in DC. So I got to meet some of the, kind of some of my heroes. AOC. love this woman. As a very bad but aspiring public speaker, it was pretty exciting for me to meet her. This is my what is his name? This is let's see, John Lewis. Yeah, that's right, John Lewis. So John Lewis is the last remaining of the big five of the civil rights movement. He's a House representative right now. This guy changed the world. He really, along with the other civil rights leaders, he really shaped what our American democracy is these days. So it was quite a pleasure to be able to get together with his people and talk about how we're going to make things better moving forward. This is Senator Caldwell. She's one of my biggest heroes. She's the senator in Washington. She introduces all sorts of really good bills for the planet, like the Land and Water Conservation Fund. She's a huge advocate for the Arctic, and it was so fun to go sit in her office and tell her about this trip that I just went on to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and pull up that picture of the wolf, and she was like so stoked about it, like incredibly stoked, the same way we get when we see El Capitan. So I went there, and I certainly never aspired to get involved in politics. I kind of hated that world. The Access Fund and the Alpine Club kind of like got me to go there for the first time, and I just did it because I thought it would be a life experience. But after doing it for a few years, like I'm starting to say, like, maybe it's even a little bit fun. I don't know. It's kind of weird, but I am enjoying it, and it seems like there is a possibility to make a change. Like when you read those books about climate change, you think that we're all doomed, but then when you go and you meet the people that are actually making it happen, they're changing the government. In a way, it makes you very optimistic about where we're headed. I also got to give a testimony in front of the Senate, in front of a special subcommittee for the Senate on climate change, which is a very scary experience for me, but I managed to do it. And in a lot of ways, this activism feels like a grand adventure, much in the way the Dawnwall did. There's this end goal that seems incredibly improbable, but we just start at the bottom and we start chipping our way out, chipping it away. And I think that's what we learn as climbers. If we kind of throw caution to the wind and we start working at it one step at a time, so often reality far surpasses what we could have ever kind of imagined what would happen in the world. And so that's why we love being here in Yosemite. It's it's full of these big dreams and these big stories, and DC can be the same way. A lot of people go to, when they think about politics, I think still, I venture to guess that less than half of the people in this room probably voted. Sorry, but that's what the statistics say. And I came up with a solution to this. I was in Australia this summer, and in Australia, voting is obligatory, like it's mandatory. You have to do it. So what they do, because they have to vote, is they decided to just make it a big party. They have a countrywide weenie roast, and they all get together, and they party, and they vote. And I realized going to the climate march last week in D.C. That it's kind of, everybody thinks that these climate marches are serious, but it feels like a big party. If any of you guys have ever been to marches, it feels like a giant party. And so my idea is that we should start throwing big voting parties. I think what the world needs is more partying, really. And climbers like to get together. The facelift is a great testament to this, and throw big parties. So that's how we're going to save the world. Party more. And get out and vote. Yeah, that's what I got for you guys tonight. Thank you so much. Timmy? Woo.
All right, thank you, Tommy Caldwell. So, yeah, monkey calls. Oh. We love the monkey calls. Tommy, so what I'm curious about is, you've been telling your story, and it's been an incredible story. And like the Dawn Wall you mentioned, it's been 4 years. But all of your free routes that have been so wild, and all of the backstory of the Dawn Wall, and you've gotten really good at telling that story. How has that prep helped you tell the story of climate change?
I think I've become I'm not a very good public speaker, I would say, but I have become pretty adept at storytelling. I think that's one thing that climbing has a step up on basically any other sports, is that we have the best stories, and therefore
we've got the best stories, everybody. Yeah.
and therefore we become good storytellers. People have asked me since the time I was like 14 years old to write articles for magazines, and so I'm able to take those skills and take them to DC and become a bit of a storyteller, and that's what sucks them in. That's what sucks our lawmakers in, and that's what makes a difference. So.
And thank you for that, because you posted something on your Instagram feed, which, you have these hundreds of thousands of followers, and then it generates hundreds and hundreds of comments. But as it pertains to like big wall climbing and going to the big mountains, whether it's Pakistan or Kyrgyzstan or wherever, we have these objective hazards we're up against, whether it's gravity or rockfall or the crux or bad gear or difficult placements. How has that prepped you for sort of the objective hazards of the trolls, the climate deniers, all of that difficulty that you face when you do use your platform and your voice? You come up against those hazards. How has that prepped you?
Yeah, that's a great question. It teaches us to love adversity, right? Like, we have this very growth mindset. We go out and we climb because we know it's going to be hard and it's going to really suck at times, but that's going to turn us into the greatest versions of ourselves. And we also learn to be sort of unrealistically optimistic, because,
I got this for sure. No, I don't. Yes, we do. Thank you, us.
Right, yeah, like anybody who looks up at El Cap, like the prospect of climbing that just seems like ridiculous. Like, it doesn't seem like it should work, so you need that unrealistic optimism to even start up in the first place. So,
it's interesting, yeah. And then you use these skills and this storytelling to tell a really important story, right? So thank you for that. Any questions for Tommy Caldwell out there? Yeah, go for it. Okay, and the question is, have you thought about public office? And then the second question is Tommy the lobbyist. So what about public office, though? Have you thought of that? Great question.
Hell no.
Hell no. He makes a great living already, dude. He's doing great, yeah.
I think Sasha is the one for that, yeah.
Sasha Julian could be. Another question for Tommy? Yeah, right there. And the question is, we're just repeating it for the live feed, is there a particular legislation or bill that you were involved in recently that you guys moved the lever on a little bit, or at least were engaged in?
Yeah, so this trip I was primarily focused on the Arctic. So there was a House bill, HR 1146, that basically would take drilling back off the table in the Arctic. And so actually while we were in DC, that bill passed in the House.
HR 1146.
Yeah.
No wonder you don't want to be a politician, right? Boring, but really important boring, yeah.
Right, so that's what I was focused on. We still got to get it through the Senate. You still got some work to do, but we're going in the right direction.
The next pitch.
Yeah.
Well done on the HR 1146 crux.
Yeah.
Another question for Tommy Caldwell. Yes, right here. Okay, the big question.
Yeah.
Can we reverse or at least cure, stop climate change, or is it inevitable that the Earth is going to keep warming? Huge question, and difficult answer, I imagine.
Yeah, really. I mean, I've kind of gone full circle on this. Like, when I was not informed about climate change, I just lived with my typical unrealistic optimism, and I'm like, sure, yeah, we can do it. And then I started to read the books, and I was like, damn, this is real. This is pretty bad. But then I've kind of like come back around to it, because when there are books out there that basically make game plans, and when I go to DC and I see big groups of people like for the Sunrise Movement mobilizing, I'm like, this could happen. As more disasters happen, the world is going to realize how important this is, and I feel like the human race is capable of absolutely extraordinary things. So I do think it's possible, but the other way I look at it is like, even if my kids' end up perishing, we might as well have an adventure and fight as hard as we can before that happens.
The struggle continues. We got the next move.
Yeah.
To believe, right? And it is the crux. We seek the crux, right?
That's right.
If we wanted it to be like predictable, it's called Netflix, and we'd stay at home and watch the world burn. But no, we're going to go out there and climb and fight and struggle mightily, right?
Yeah.
Another question for Tommy Caldwell out there?
Here, I'll follow up on that a little bit. Like, I hear a lot of naysayers about climate change issues these days, and they say things like, China needs to be held accountable, or why are these kids being exposed to this really depraved? We're scaring all of our children. And the way I look at it is, we're not, we don't love scaring children. That's not like what we get joy out of. We are scaring them because
that's what Halloween is for, by the way. Yes.
we need to like prepare them. We need to build that grit in them the same way that my father did and I, or else, that's gonna and the thing about that grit is that's actually what creates happiness. It's what creates purpose. And so the fact that they are a little bit scared right now is probably gonna, create way more wonderful lives.
And Molly Mitchell, who spoke earlier, right? She has this personal, grit in her to overcome her psychological and dealing with anxiety, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then working with Enoch Glidden, activating this kind of community and himself. And then with you, sort of that same thing, activating yourself, and then a global community. It comes down to electing the challenge, right? Yeah. Like making it difficult and saying, I'm in, I can make a difference. We could do this.
Yeah. My favorite term is joyful masochism.
I like that, yeah. Got that climbing, yes, that's definitely climbing.
Yeah.
Yes, Guy Yeager, question?
Hey, Tommy, so I'm sure like 10 years ago you didn't see yourself having an impact like this, and I'm sure this room here like doesn't know how they can have an impact like that. Do you have any advice to the group of all of Facelift of how they can get involved in helping out and supporting your issues that you want to?
Yeah, damn.
Okay,
amazing question.
And then quick question is, Tommy, 10 years ago, maybe you didn't realize you'd have this platform and that you'd be utilizing it to create change. What is your advice for those here at Facelift and for those on the live feed on how they can get involved, not only in climate change, but personally making a difference?
Yeah, there's like a million answers to that question, but when big groups of people mobilize, that's powerful. So go to the strikes, go party with everybody. That's a huge part of it. Voting, that's obviously probably the most important thing you can do. The outdoor industry has created some incredible tools to get involved. One is Patagonia Action Works. If you go to Patagonia Action Works website, you can figure out how to get involved in local nonprofits. Patagonia, for the last couple of years, has given $10 million each year to local nonprofits, so they really believe in this grassroots approach. And the cool thing about local nonprofits is that, it builds community. You're getting involved in these nonprofits that are at your home. They're local. So when you go and you hang out with these people, you talk to them and you learn more ways to activate. And really, that's the most powerful thing, is getting together as a community and working together. So the local nonprofits are great in that way. You can follow organizations like POW. You can just there's all these text to action links where if you just send a text, you'll start getting fed information on how to become a better advocate. Yeah.
And I think as well as it's identifying the problem, Guy, right? I mean, seeing that this is wrong and my actions will make a difference in it, right? Being that change you wish to see in the world, right? When to now, right?
Yeah.
Another question for Tommy Caldwell out there? Yeah, in the back.
Tommy, what was one of the climate change books that changed your whole perspective about this?
Climate change books? Yeah, so I read a couple books pretty early on in my journey that were pretty transformative. One was called The Uninhabitable Earth, probably the most depressing book you could ever read, but certainly activating. Another one was called Drawdown. It's like the battle plan. It's like the exact steps that we could take. Very dry book, but yeah, it's a good one. So yeah, those are probably the two main ones.
Okay, and then a final question here. Yeah, in the way back. So the two-part question, and the first part of that question is climate change, as we may have heard, is going to affect a lot of people who can't do anything about it, right? So individuals are going to be dealing with the effects of that. And then on top of that, that diversity within the outdoor climbing world or the outdoors overall. And how are you working on creating more diversity or your awareness of that?
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I haven't focused my energy on the diversity side of it, but I am often involved in panel discussions, going to meet with tribes, the big fight for Bears Ears a few years ago. I think that the climbers connect with nature in similar ways to the original owners. We know that land, we have this intimate relationship with it, so that coming together is really powerful. Another thing I realized in Australia this summer is in Australia there's a big fight for the Grampians National Park. It's kind of like they're threatening to shut it down to climbing, which would kind of be like Yosemite getting shut down to climbing here. And it's kind of because the politics has kind of pit the climbers against the original owners. Even though I find the Australians pretty sympathetic. In the States, I've started to see it going the other way. We're fighting the extractive industries to save these lands, and so we're coming together, and there's huge power in that. At the Access Fund Climb the Hill event, there I would say probably about 40% of all the conversation was led by Brown Girls Climb and a few other organizations. Yes, nice. And so there was a huge presence just bringing underprivileged communities into the conversation, celebrating that, and trying to give everybody an equal voice. Yeah.
And I work with Outdoor Afro. So on October 5th, we're doing an event in Oakland, which is where Outdoor Afro is based. And it's at a climbing gym. It's at Touchstone's Great Western Power Company. And there's Color of the Crag and Brothers of Climbing. And so I think it's happening. And so these small steps are being taken. Solomon Jun is speaking here as well. And I think that the voices are being heard and actions are happening. So I think it's slowly but surely, right? And I think, like we were saying with Guy, it's like recognizing the issue and then making steps to make it better. And the more voices we have protecting these places like Yosemite National Park, cleaning them up, conserving them, the better we are.
Yeah, and about a year ago, Patagonia organized a diversity summit. And so we came to Yosemite, and a bunch of people got together and just talked about this exact issue, like how do we raise up the voices of the diverse community in a sport that's historically, white middle-aged males.
And then Tommy, so talking about that, like this sport that is historically really self-serving, right? So it seems like you having children, climbing is amazing. We're all here for climbing, and it gives us so much, but then we want to do more or pay it forward or give it back. But with the advent of having your children, it all of a sudden became this catalyst for you to speed up that rate of change to create something more than just climbing for yourself or for that platform, right? And wanting to do, as you mentioned, more for future generations, right?
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tommy Caldwell.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you to Tommy Caldwell. Thank you to Enoch Glidden. Thank you to Molly Mitchell. Real quick before you go, we're going to take these chairs and we're going to stack them up 8 high and then slide them over to the walls. 8 high and slide them over to the walls. Thank you very much. 16th Annual Facelift.